Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Daily Objective. And the latest news off the internet you may have heard is that the DailyWire has purchased, they've licensed, they've acquired the legal exclusive right. Sorry, I forgot to turn off my speaker in my headphones so I could hear my own beautiful voice speaking back to me. DailyWire, the Ben Shapiro, Matt Walsh network, the conservative landmark network on the internet, they've acquired the exclusive right to, adapt, whatever, to depict the Atlas Shrugged likeness via media. We'll get into the legalese because I am here with a guy who, he knows the life of Ayn Rand. He wrote The Passion of Ayn Rand's Critics. He knows, I think, safely can guess what Ayn Rand would think of this development. Please welcome James Valliant.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm not sure. I will do my best to channel Ayn Rand, but I certainly cannot speak for Ayn Rand. I do want to say that up front, but hopefully I have some sympathy for what her perspective, I think, would have been on this.
Yeah. So I was being exaggerating a little bit there. Obviously, Ayn Rand has been, deceased for like over 40 years. It's been a long time. All anyone could really do is study her philosophy and, do their best to apply it. Now, a couple of years ago, Zack Snyder, the acclaimed director, was talking about adapting The Fountainhead, like making a movie, which, of course, anyone who takes Rand's philosophy seriously would rightfully kind of cringe in anticipation of like what might be done with her work of art. But at the same time, it's like, you got to be realistic. You got to be serene, I say, because we're now in a place where we'd like to see Rand's work and philosophy become like mainstream, like accepted and celebrated and really influential, her philosophy. We're not there yet. So to kind of get from where we are today to where we hope to be in the future, I would think Rand's art, her novels, need to go through some bastardizations kind of on the way to get there, realistically, because the amount of people who take Rand's philosophy seriously today is small, and very few of them have the skill, the interest, or the ability to do a good adaptation of her work. Now, the worst thing about this news, from my perspective, is that I've been looking forward to seeing the Mark Pellegrino produced series that him and his co-producers have been teasing on this show and on this network for a year or two now. And I imagine what they've been planning to doing would also maybe upset some objectivists. But nonetheless, it's going to be a lot closer to the real thing than whatever, the Daily Wire is going to end up doing, I imagine. But in any case, I'm mostly wondering if this development will interfere with the development of the strike, as they've named it, the Pellegrino group. So that to me is like kind of the worst news of all of this. But the other kind of the main thing that makes objectivists upset, I would think, is just that they think or they expect that the Daily Wire is going to kind of misrepresent Rand's work, or in a very superficial way kind of tell the story from Atlas Shrugged, but leave out a lot of very important elements. What was your reaction when you heard the news that the Daily Wire is going to produce an Atlas Shrugged series?
Color me terrified once more. I am serene in one sense about, let me put it this way, the future prospects of Atlas Shrugged as a property. I am not so sanguine about the what's going to happen here. I could be wrong, and I hope to be proved wrong. And gosh knows, I'd love to be proved wrong. And for there to be finally a decent cinematic adaptation. The first thing I'd say, though, is your point was very well taken. A film, a movie series cannot be the novel. They're two different artistic media. They cannot be compared. They're going to be something totally different. And the worst thing is that whatever the novel is, people who love the novel and go see the movie, whatever the movie turns out to be, it's never quite the same. The actors aren't the way they pictured it in their head. I pictured the heroine so differently, or I imagined this scene this way, and that's always going to be an inherent disappointment. It's a different medium. Now, there have been outstanding adaptations of novels to film. I think of Gone with the Wind. I think by Margaret Mitchell. I think of Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco. They were really outstanding adaptations of novel to film. And if you've seen the novel, you actually were kind of pleased at what happened. It was less. They had to cut down the material, but it's just sort of an abbreviated version of what the essence of the novel was. I also think of the Italian version of Ayn Rand's We the Living. And there it was interesting because their working script, in effect, was the Italian translation of the novel. But when Ayn Rand herself did, that's why it was so completely wonderful and faithful, also had a good director and actors. When Ayn Rand herself condensed it into one film with English subtitles, she, though, realized, yeah, you can't do the novel. You got to concentrate, give the essence of it. The film is not going to be the book. And so in that sense, all of us just have to be serene and take a chill pill. And no matter how much we love the novel, we have to accept it's going to be different. Now,
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, but think of The Fountainhead as a film adaptation too. There, however, Ayn Rand was around. She wrote the screenplay. She could, and Shoshana is going to have through the ARI, they're going to have a discussion of the dramatic story of the making of the movie of The Fountainhead, which in part will tell the story of how Ayn Rand was around to sort of police the entire project. And if something didn't go right on the set and she happened to be there that day, she could storm it up to Jack Warner and say, I'm going to denounce this movie if you don't change that bit. And the other thing is that she knew it would be different. She knew it wouldn't be the same as the novel, but she regarded it as an advertisement for the novel. And it turned out to be a good advertisement for the novel, even though in many ways she was disappointed aesthetically with the film. But think of that. Warner Brothers, that was the big Warner Brothers movie of the year with Gary Cooper and King Vidor as the director and Max Steiner writing the musical score. So I'm not sure the same production values are going to be used here. And at least for whatever Ayn Rand's aesthetic qualms about the movie The Fountainhead, it was at least the big Warner Brothers film of the year with high production values. I'm not sure the same we'll be able to say the same about this. Certainly the last production of it was very disappointing for aesthetic reasons, primarily, in my view. It just didn't match Ayn Rand's dramatic style or her aesthetic approach, but also it didn't really help. I mean, insofar as it did help sales of the novel, terrific, but it was not a faithful adaptation. In fact, it kind of did violence to Ayn Rand's intention, both philosophically and aesthetically, in my view.
Mm-hmm. I think we had an episode of the Daily Objective maybe a couple of years ago now, where it was like misrepresenters of Rand. That was kind of an ongoing series. And one of them was, I think, about the movies. So I think you were on that. So if people can look that up, maybe if the producer can find the link and post it. And by the way, I'm going to jump to the announcements today soon because it's related. At 10 p.m. UK time today, it's TV Talk with Mark Pellegrino, Jennifer Buoni, and Jacqueline Schumann reviewing For All Mankind, the series. And something tells me they're going to have some very relevant insight as far as how this affects their project. And so, like I said, the worst thing about this, the main bad thing about this news to me is that this could block a better project from being produced. But as far as the Daily Wire's acquisition of the Atlas Shrugged franchise, or however you call it, the brand, whatever, the likeness, the story, it's going to be behind a paywall. It's going to be for the Daily Wire Plus subscribers. So my understanding is like 1 million people who pay monthly to see this exclusive content. So basically, it's basically a bunch of conservatives are going to be exposed to Ayn Rand who might not otherwise be. And they're already Daily Wire subscribers, so they're not going to get much worse. Like they can only get closer. So if this gets more of them to read Ayn Rand, to investigate further, to look up content by, the Ayn Rand Institute or whatever, like to kind of learn more about who this author was. I mean, to me, that's obviously a positive. It'd be like if Ben Shapiro was having like an Atlas Shrugged book club reading group, and it was for Daily Wire exclusively. So I would assume he's going to misunderstand and misrepresent what's happening in that novel to an extent, but he's only promoting Ayn Rand to his choir, to his converted, whatever, to people that are there. So in that respect, it's not like this is going to cause widespread misunderstanding of what Atlas Shrugged is, because it's only kind of going to expose Ayn Rand to an audience that can very well use to learn more about her. That's kind of
what I was interested to read was that the producer behind this, the guy behind the DailyWire that acquired this, said that from the outset of his whole project of having DailyWire do movies a couple of years ago, this was the project that he had in mind for doing it. And when you read the quotation he has from it, he locates the theme, at least not Ayn Rand's metaphysical theme of the role of the mind in human survival, but at least the ethical theme. At least he seems to be aware of deeper philosophical issues, that the morality of self-interest it seems to be the aspect of it that he wants to present. So he wants to present some philosophical content here. It was the motivation, I guess, one of the principal motivations behind this whole DailyWire streaming service that they're doing. And you're right, it's just for the conservative audience, and a rather limited conservative audience at that. And if he does say, make an ethical theme about self-interest and selfishness to a bunch of Christian conservatives or Jewish conservatives, it can only do them good. In my view, if it's to a bunch of conservatives, look, the way you want to defend the free market is by defending self-interest, in a serious, principled way. And you're right, you make a good point. Insofar as it's talking to them, Atlas Shrugged can only do them good, it seems to me, if he's true to that. Now, my great fear is, because they are religious conservatives, or tend to be, that they're going to focus exclusively on the political aspects. They're not going to even imply that there are deeper philosophical issues. I'm afraid, again, about the dramatic standards and the qualities here. That's where my focus really is, my concern. When I say I'm terrified, I'm terrified because obviously I love the novel so much, and it means more to me, say, than Gone with the Wind. And I much more want an accurate depiction of this. But like you say, it's going to be a different medium. They're talking to conservatives here who can only use the ethical message, which seems to be the motive of the producer. But Ben Shapiro himself is behind this, right? He's the editor emeritus, as I was just told, of DailyWire. He's one of the producers, in effect, who owns the rights now. So,
Boring, is it Jeremy Boring? He said, when we decided in 2020 to launch into entertainment, meaning the DailyWire, he says, my vision at that time was to bring Ayn Rand's seminal work on the creative power of economic freedom and the terrible consequences of its loss to the screen as a premium series, he says. And then he goes on to say, and we acquired the exclusive rights. So yeah, he sees it as an economics related book. A lot of people do. I mean, a lot of well-meaning readers, they sort of take the point of the book as being, economic freedom, because that is the most glaring sort of thing happening in that book. So I think we can take for granted that the Daily Wire Plus is not going to do a faithful depiction of what that book stands for, both because it's very difficult, but more importantly, because they don't care for the deeper meaning of the philosophy within the book. So yeah,
in that sense, I'm much more hopeful about remakes of The Fountainhead. Now that the estate of Ayn Rand no longer has any control over the movie rights to The Fountainhead, and only the most minimal connection anymore with the rights to Atlas Shrugged, obviously those books are now in the hands of whoever buys the rights. And that's the way it is. Whoever buys the rights can now do whatever they want with those movies. The Fountainhead, because it is directly political, you have to address the ethical and psychological themes. And there have been several directors, big directors, since Michael Cimino back in the 70s, several big directors, and they've been more recently said they wanted to do remakes of The Fountainhead. Michael Cimino wanted to have David Bowie play Howard Rourke at one time. So some very creative ideas, but those would have had to focus on the ethical and psychological aspects that Ayn Rand was talking about. Atlas Shrugged, as you point out, at the most superficial level, politics is all people can see from it. But you're right. The producer said that, but he even went further. He even went into the ethics of self-interest as being one of the important themes of Atlas Shrugged, which is really interesting. Do they really mean to address the ethics of rational egoism? Honestly, I wonder how they would handle that and how they're going to handle that.
So the average person out there, a lot of people out there, most people, they think we're kind of crazy. Like, so like they know there's a group of people somewhere who really, really took Atlas Shrugged to heart and like really kind of followed its author to the edge of the earth. But that's just like a handful of people. So to them, it's like, yeah, of course, we're not going to completely, depict everything in this novel, because it's to them, it's just like adapting a popular story. So like we have to be realistic. And I think the best way to handle it is to be calm and serene about it, because the louder we protest, the more it just kind of, reaffirms in people's minds that we're like crazy nerds, we're like geeking out over this, like it's, like somebody's ruining Batman or something like that.
Well, there are movies, like they'll do Mel Gibson's movie about the Passion of the Christ, and people will be protesting out in front, and those protesters will only get more people to go check it out. The loud screams against a movie only tend to throw a spotlight on it and give it more attention. It seems to me you're absolutely right in that regard too. This is going to be for a limited premium service audience here, and a conservative one at that.
Yeah. There's something, there's kind of like a double-edged sword whenever conservatives try to change the culture. Like, they're sort of inherently not cool. Like, conservatives, They cannot be like hip artists, or like they can't. It's very rare for a conservative to be very influential in the world of fashion or design or art. It's very rare for a conservative to have that kind of effect. So when there is like someone in the fashion world or in the entertainment world who like wants to lower taxes, it's like it's front page news. Like, whoa, did you hear? This guy's a closeted conservative. But it's just because that's how it's the bring out.
You see, in a thing of Atlas, in the reproduction of Atlas Shrugged here, if someone could bring out, one of the things Ayn Rand said so provocatively as she was writing Atlas Shrugged to the press, my next novel is going to be about, she said, I'm going to connect sex and economics. If someone could actually bring out the romantic, sexual dimensions of Atlas Shrugged along with the political dimension, show the connection, then you'd get to the deeper philosophical issues perforce. But I'm not sure that religious conservatives would focus on Ayn Rand's secularism, her pro-science attitude, her pro-sex attitude, for example, much less her anti-religious attitude, which is implicit throughout. And of course, those are the very things that true fans of the novel would want to see. But it's those very elements that are not so strikingly not conservative. Today, I think the idea of a woman running a major industry is less provocative. I mean, when Ayn Rand wrote Atlas Shrugged in the 1950s, the idea of a woman running a transcontinental railroad was unheard of. A woman running heavy industry, she was the first presentation of a heroine like that in literature, pretty much. And today, that idea is far less shocking to conservatives. So it won't be the idea of Dagny Taggart, being able to squash her male competitors that will frighten them. It would be the sexual parts, I would imagine, the artistic, spiritual, there are artists, composers that are involved in this. It's that aspect, the spiritual aspect. And those are the aspects that if you can connect it to the politics, actually do get to the deeper philosophical themes here. But of course, conservatives, especially religious conservatives, are going to be blind to that entire half of the story, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of dichotomy, like a lot of inner conflicts that conservatives have. So, like on one hand, they want to retain classical art and the classicism, whatever. Like they don't want all this modernity. But when you look at the classics, classic art has a lot of nudity, a lot of sex. It's not vulgar typically, but it's just like it contains things that conservatives don't wish to promote. So like a book like Atlas Shrugged, even if they leave out, a lot of the deep philosophical aspects and they just focus on the story, you have, an older age woman who's never been married, no kids. She's having an affair with a married man throughout much of the story. It's like, are they going to depict that? And I was wondering.
That's
like,
it. Dagny Taggart's telling Hank Reardon, I want you like an animal. Are conservatives going to be happy with that?
Are they going to depict it? Is what
Are they
I'm
gonna
wondering.
depict it
Are they?
anyway?
Are they?
Right.
I'm genuinely curious if the Daily Wire Plus shows like sex and nudity, because like all of Rand's novels, all of her stories have nudity or sex at at some point or another. Because those things are great, because those things are important about character development and art and whatever. For whatever reasons, Rand included those things. Conservatives typically, they shy away from that type of thing. I'm not being flippant when I ask, like, do the Daily Wire permit sex and nudity in their subscription content? So I'm actually curious, are they going to have that?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because in their times, the novel The Fountainhead, the movie The Fountainhead, and the novel Atlas Shrugged were sexually cutting edge. They were edgy. One of the things that conservatives at the time didn't like about Ayn Rand was just exactly that. Let's see, I can remember conservatives reviewing the novel Atlas Shrugged, saying there's so much, there's so much promiscuous, I think one of the phrases they used was gymnastic sex going on in Ayn Rand's novels. That just offended publications like the National Review when they were first reviewing it back in the 50s, and said they repeatedly attacked Ayn Rand conservatives over just exactly that issue. Or William Buckley, he denounced Atlas Shrugged. How did he denounce? He said Ayn Rand failed to realize that Jesus' Sermon on the Mount was the last word in ethics. Mm-hmm. And, if you bring that kind of attitude to it, you can only destroy the very essence of Atlas Shrugged, of course.
I mean, in more recently, Ben Shapiro, the co-owner, founder of the Daily Wire, he's criticized Atlas Shrugged, saying that Dagny, she jumps from bed to bed, like she's just going from man to man, like as if three men over the course of decades,
a lifetime.
A lifetime. The first one of whom Francisco ghosted her. He disappeared on her. Right. And then, I don't know, 10, 20 years later, whatever it was, then comes Reardon, and then finally, the love of her life, Galt. And we're spoiling the novel left and right here.
Left and right here, but you're right. But they were all in serious relationships. We involved the most profound spiritual values. These were not promiscuity at all. By today's standards, of course, Dagny Taggart's sex life is serious and, thoughtful and relatively non-promiscuous, tamed by today's standards. As I say, though, in its own time, 60 years ago, it was a provocative novel in that sense. Ayn Rand was denounced for her overt materialism by Whittaker Chambers in his review of Atlas Shrugged in the National Review. If that's the way you look at Ayn Rand, you are fundamentally not going to get Atlas Shrugged at all. Ayn Rand was all about cutting through those dichotomies. If, like Whittaker Chambers, you could read the novel and call her a forthright materialist, you're obviously so screwed up about what Ayn Rand was talking about, you're so wrong in her philosophical intention, that you should not touch the project with a 10-foot pole. So any conservatives of that ilk should have nothing to do with the content of this project if they hope it to be a halfway decent, halfway accurate presentation of Ayn Rand's intentions.
Yeah, so I just wonder how they're going to go about depicting these things, depicting Dagny and her sex life, or depicting, Hank's affair and the fact that affair is ultimately vindicated. It like he discards guilt for putting his own sex life, his own happiness above his marriage.
Or take those big fat evil businessmen getting favors from the government. How are they going to handle that?
Oh yeah, I mean they
right.
Especially at a time when the Daily Wire and conservatives in general have been advocating for antitrust and all types of breaking up of big tech. Maybe they would say
legislation. Yeah.
Maybe they would say that, like, oh no, big tech and Zuckerberg, they're like the Oren Boyles of our time, right? Like Oren Boyle being the subsidized government crony. But let me ask you this: if Oren Boyle disappears, did he create a product that people are using? I'm going to guess no. These conservatives, like the Daily Wire and them, they're using YouTube, they're using Facebook, they're using these big tech inventions and developments and that they're decrying. they're using them. And if the government takes it away from their owners, like the conservatives are going to keep using it. It's just, they're living with contradictions, I would say.
Yes, and for conservatives, Atlas Shrugged is a minefield of things. They may not realize half the minefields, and so they might just step on them and say things that are opposed to religion or Christian ethics and not even realize it. But a lot of them, I suspect they will be well aware what Ayn Rand is saying. Conservatives have long been well aware of what Ayn Rand was saying, and that it is not a conservative message at all, fundamentally. So those I fear that they will simply leave out or misrepresent or turn on their heads. Others may be too subtle for them to pick up on. They just may step on those mines. But for conservatives, they're walking through a minefield if they attempt to do a religious conservative version of Atlas Shrugged.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's like, I know they like the story. So many people have read Rand's novels and been impacted by them, and very, very few of those people are committed to Rand's philosophy. So they're just going to say, like, yeah, we're inspired by this novel. We want to depict this story. It's a great story. Like, and yes, we're not going to be exactly true to Rand's message in the book. So they're going to say that. And I say, okay, fair enough. But then what are you going to omit? Like, what are you going to include? Because so much of just the story, just the surface level stuff are antithetic to what the Daily Wire wishes to fuse into the culture. So right. I'm not going to watch it. I'm like, I didn't watch the third Atlas Shrugged movie. When I heard Snyder was making a Fountainhead movie, I was curious to watch it and I was conflicted, and that kind of fell apart anyway. But I'm going to be very selective with watching film adaptations of Rand's novels. Definitely, I don't, unless I hear remarkable things about it. I doubt I'll bother.
I'll let some people do the advanced reconnaissance on this one for me. And if they bring back positive reports, I think I'm going to go venturing. I think I have a similar attitude that you do. But Ayn Rand's novels have sold tens of millions of copies over the years, and she has tens and tens of millions of readers and fans in the world. But the level at which they understand and appreciate Ayn Rand, you could do a Venn diagram of concentric circles of people. Well, I sort of liked it, because it was a fun novel, a mystery novel, a romance novel. Then you got other people who like it for its aesthetics, or people just like it for a purely political thing because they're not terribly deep. They got to take a superficial political. And then as you get deeper and deeper, there are really just tens of thousands, I think, of fans who truly appreciate and understand the philosophical message that Ayn Rand conveyed, not the tens of millions who at some level say they like and appreciate Ayn Rand's work. The Library of Congress 20 years ago did a survey. It ranked Atlas Shrugged as second only to the Bible in terms of the book that most influenced Americans' lives. So there are millions of people who've read and been influenced by Ayn Rand's novels, but I think only a segment of them are going to be as, let me put it this way, philosophically and aesthetically as discriminating as you or I will be.
Yeah, and even among people who are inspired enough that they become like committed to studying Rand's philosophy, how many of them really end up getting it? Like the effort it takes to then, like, that's where the work begins, because the effort it takes to really understand it and to discard contradictions, to find out what this philosophy actually says. So like just the amount of people. So even among people who do become committed to Rand's philosophy, many of them, they get seduced, let's say, by the populist right, or they get seduced by religion. Once again, someone like Jordan Peterson comes along and kind of tells them, oh no, you can be both rational and, religious. The list goes on.
Ayn Rand's ideas are just so radical. You really have to be a thoughtful person in today's culture, which is so hostile to Rand's ideas. You really have to penetrate through all that hostility. You have to be thoughtful, give it attention, say, wow, this is something, even if hey, she's saying something unique, you have to follow that up and come to try and understand it as best as you can, or you won't get it at all. Because her ideas are so provocative, so radical. You probably never heard some of this stuff, anything like it before. So you really have to be an independent, thoughtful person just to go that deep. And a film will never convert anybody to a philosophy. No film will ever change a person's life the way, say, reading The Fountainhead or reading Atlas Shrugged. So many readers say it changed my life. You're not going to have that life-changing experience with any film like you would a good novel, much less a great one like The Fountainhead or Atlas Shrugged.
Yeah. So ultimately, the battle is in classrooms, and it's in whatever you call it, the faculty, the department, the place where people in charge of schools congregate. And that's where the battle is really being waged, so to speak. And it's happening slow, but it's the full-time academics that are infiltrating universities with, by bringing Ayn Rand into the mix. It's the efforts to create private school efforts throughout the country, throughout the world for the young. I mean, it's the things that don't seem like they're changing the world, but over time, I think, will prove to be changing the world.
Let me say that artists play an important role in changing the world too. I think that obviously philosophers are the key here, and they're the drivers of this bus, and they're in the driver's seat. Really, we depend upon philosophy to be the main thing to get us ahead in this world, make any kind of progress. But art plays a vital role. And frankly, I would put them next in order of potential influence. I just got through saying no movie is ever going to change someone's life like that. But you know what movies can do is they can give people the emotional inspiration. They can give people the emotional sense of what a better culture would be like, or what high values constitute, give them that concrete sense. And so I think artists, romantic artists, including objectivist artists, have a vital role to play in helping our culture lead us out. I think philosophers and artists are going to lead us to a new renaissance, if we're ever going to get to a new renaissance. But I just don't think any single movie has the power that a great book like Atlas Shrugged can have when you read it. But if this movie can get, another million people to read that novel, then that by itself will be a value, no matter how iffy the film.
I agree. Art is ultimately kind of the mechanism by which people's values are discovered and shaped, and like art is how the world changes. But like it's there's kind of like a relationship between the two. Like the ideas taught in classrooms largely inform people, artists, or the people teaching are inspired by art in some way. I mean, there's kind of both going on. So I know like everybody wants to see Atlas Shrugged depicted at, the right way in film, and it's like it's a good thing to want, but I'm saying don't forget that ultimately the way the world will change, and the way the world always has changed, is slowly through the academic process, and that's kind of the way I see it.
I agree.
All right, we got a lot of chat room action here today. We got let's scroll back. We got Francis has been a member for 3 months. Thank you, Francis. He says, quote, "What would I do with his money if I have to give up my mind to get it?" End quote. And that was Ayn Rand refusing $1 million in exchange for adding religion to objectivism. Yeah, something's money.
If they go so far as to suggest in any way that a mystical theme, or that there's some kind of theme that's consistent with mysticism, or some kind of assault on reason, or some kind of defense of religion, or the idea of God, it would be, I think everyone on the face of it would see what a gross contradiction it was, what an insult to the idea, what a contradiction to the whole theme of Atlas Shrugged that would be. So let's hope that they see the obvious mistake that would be, but it's the Daily Wire, so would I put it past them? No.
Did you see the third Atlas Shrugged movie? Because I did not.
I finally held my nose long enough.
Was there a preacher in Galt's Gulch?
It was. I'd rather not even remember the disgusting aspects of it. Well, Ayn Rand actually had conceived of having a Christian clergyman a priest in the story, and she cut the person out because she just thought it couldn't be realistic. A priest who ends up sympathizing with the strikers in any way, just didn't work. Her mind, she rejected the idea.
So Rand was going to have this priest character abandon his faith in favor of Galt's philosophy?
She hadn't fully worked out the character though, but she had in her notes a character where there was going to be a priest who was going to see at least some of the light, and she was going to get him some of the way along to discovery. She cut him out because she thought it was just not a realistic.
Yeah, you would need that character you would need to see him for a while to like for his transition to become real. You wouldn't want to just have like one page of the novel where Dagny is, getting the tour and she sees him in the valley and he's like, yeah, I was a priest. And then, I spoke to Francisco for 20 minutes. It's like, but I do think if there was a way to have that character, in the novel, that would be a powerful thing. Someone who was like took his faith, his religion very seriously, ends up realizing it was misdirected, and he
right.
discovers.
You'd want to avoid some, obviously you want to indicate the problem with his metaphysics and ethics, and that would be the whole purpose of having such a priest there. But being a priest, could it really be a realistic thing? Could you handle such a change, such a dramatic change? It would be so serious a project. It would derail, take you away from the main. She's already got a 1,000-page novel. How much more would she need to explain to make such a character realistic, you see? And it would be taking us on a sidetrack, a rabbit hole that would be really difficult to do.
We got Phil with £5 saying, strange how anti-Rand zealots have so many opinions about their version of what she was thinking. Do they have an opinion of what she was thinking, or do they just not care for much of what she was thinking? Like, I think the common view thing people say is like, yeah, I love a lot of Ayn Rand stuff. Obviously, she went too far in such and such way, or they insult her in some way, or they indicate that she was misguided or too extreme. Like, so I don't know if anyone at the Daily Wire is saying, here's what Rand meant to say.
I was reading the comments on a news report of this, the first news report that came out on this. I was reading the comments section of that, and repeatedly Ayn Rand was saying, oh, well, they're going to make a movie about Ayn Rand's sociopathic ideas. They call her a sociopath. People on the left. I mean, if you're that far gone, if you just think she's Jeffrey Dahmer or something, and literally we're comparing her in that comment thread to Jeffrey Dahmer. So there are people like that out there.
Some of them work at the Daily Wire. I mean, just a few years. I mean, I'm not exaggerating. Just a few years ago, Michael Knowles and Ben Shapiro and a couple other, maybe Charlie Kerr, I don't remember who it was, but like they're doing a panel, and like somehow Ayn Rand comes up and they start laughing, calling her crazy. That's how. I mean, Ben Shapiro has made statements saying her philosophy is pretty garbage, as he called it. There's generally a lot of look. We all separate the artist from the art every day, right? We love music, and we might hate who the person is that created it and what they stand for. We do that all the time. So like Ayn Rand to us is like the exception. She's like the one artist we love the art, and we are fascinated and admiring of the artist. But there's nothing like unusual about like the people at the Daily Wire saying we don't really care for the author and everything she stood for, but we appreciate her novel enough to want it on our network. So, all right. Vergard has been a member for 2 months and says they damn better not make John Galt a wacky Jesus guy.
Yeah.
Ali with $2 says the Daily Wire going to have a problem with Rand's atheism. I mean, yeah, it depends how much of the Galt speech is going to be in there, because there's not a whole lot of talk about religion in the novel other than when Galt breaks down mystics of the mind and mystics of the muscle and goes into the philosophical.
Well, conservatives have always had a problem with Ayn Rand's rejection of religion. William Buckley, Russell Kirk, Whittaker Chambers back in the 50s. More recently, Ben Shapiro, as you just observed. And then you've got this wacky thing where you've got anti-Ayn Rand figures like Donald Trump saying The Fountainhead was his favorite book. So I think there's a degree of schizophrenia. They realize they've always been envious of Ayn Rand's popularity among the intellectuals and among the young, and her power to reach people at a different level than conservatives have ever been able to reach. young people, for example, as I say, or philosophically minded people. Conservatives just don't have the power to reach those people that Ayn Rand did. And they've always been kind of jealous of her ability to do so. They know that her work was the most powerful defense of freedom, capitalism, the American system that was penned, maybe has ever been penned. They know that. They know the power of it. And so they want to, ride the popularity and power of it, but they don't realize that part of that power is that Ayn Rand was dramatically anti-conservative in many fundamental ways.
She was. John Spinoza has been a member for 3 months, and he says Chris Pine as Galt. Do you know who that actor is? I don't know who Chris Pine is.
I'm not familiar with the actor.
Oh. Ali with $2 says, surprised no Mark considering he had shopping rights. Oh, like maybe Mark should be included in the Daily Wire thing because he had shopping rights, whatever that means. First of all, I'm sure the Daily Wire would be happy to have Mr. Pellegrino. But so far, I hate to say this because I don't like being mean, but the only actors the Daily Wire currently has are the rejects of Hollywood,
Oh my God, the worst thing you could do would be just to put actors in there who are conservatives who feel like they're on the outs. If it turns out, even if you get, Kelsey Grammer and Tim Allen, I don't want conservatives to be cast in the Atlas Shrugged simply because they're conservatives. That would be the worst thing. That would be the worst thing. You can't care about their politics when you're casting actors, okay? Make sure they're good actors who at least have some sympathy for what's going on here. That's it. You can't use politics. Yeah.
Right. No. So I don't think the Daily Wire are necessarily casting based on the political views of the actors, but the only actors they can get are people that are not working in the regular showbiz. So, Mark luckily is a gainfully often employed actor. So who does the Daily Wire have? Gina Carano and probably Kirk Cameron and probably just like, the guy from Kevin Sorbo. It's just like people who
please contact Mark Pellegrino. Please contact Mark Pellegrino.
Well, I've joked with Mark on the show. I said, well, if you ever really get canceled, at least you'll always have the Daily Wire to turn to.
Daily Wire, right?
He did not find that.
Can't get work at regular Hollywood anymore, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, like the Daily Wire producing movies and stuff, it's like, to me, it feels like, I don't know, when you were a kid, did you ever go to someone's house and instead of brand name cereal, they have a big pillowcase of Cheerios looking Cheerios, fake, and it probably tastes fine, but it's the best thing is the name brand, the flashy thing. It's you want, so that's the alternative news and alternative movies and alternative Hollywood. They can't really ever be cool.
My comparison here is real rock and roll versus Christian rock. I mean, do you really want the Led Zeppelin and the Pink Floyd if you're going to go into 70s stadium rock or something, or do you want the Debbie Boone? You light up my life. And the difference here with Atlas Shrugged is sort of, I think, analogous here. You want the hardcore, the real stuff, the heavy, hardcore fan stuff, or do you want the watered down Debbie Boone Christianized version of it, which would of course destroy the very essence of it?
Right. That's why I was saying I was curious to see what Zack Snyder would do with The Fountainhead, because he's a director first, he's a producer first, and then maybe he has his beliefs he wants to fuse in. But the Daily Wire and conservatives, they love conservatism more than creating movies, right? So they're basically they're using movies as a means to change the culture. So they are correct that movies do change the culture, but they're kind of putting the cart in front of the horse by thinking they can force the process.
There's nothing worse than a Marxist who makes the political theme the central feature of his art. There's nothing worse than a Christian conservative who does the same thing. One of the reasons why the left is so much better culture wars than the right is because they are not so clunky and heavy-handed in their political theme and propaganda. They understand that it's a subtler social statement or psychological statement, or at best philosophical even statement, which they have to get at. And I just hope to heck that that's the same attitude they bring to this. You cannot let politics drive your deeper philosophy. which is what conservatives do, and which a lot of Marxists do. The politics is what determines their deeper ethical and epistemological ideas, not the other way about.
Yeah, so this is why I say like the philosophy department and just the academics are generally really changing the culture, because like artists are going to make art no matter what the philosophy is. They're going to keep making the art they want to make. In a sense, the artists are the most selfish of professionals. But like the kind of what determines kind of what ideas are conveyed in their art is largely going to be sort of influenced by the intellectual sort of class, the intellectual influencers in the classrooms and therefore in the culture. So that's sort of how I think of it. Marilyn with $5 says, looks like the sellers were the Peikoff family partnership and the estate of Ayn Rand. Yeah, I don't know if those are the same thing, those two, or if those are two separate things.
They had, I don't understand the exact connection there, but the Peikoff and the estate of Ayn Rand had barely any, they had some control, but only tenuous, I would describe, control over the project in the first place. And that's why such a rotten production was made at all, the first run through. And so the same connection is still there, but it's just as tenuous.
Yeah. So from what I heard, and this is kind of like, take it for what it's worth, because this is just something that like people have said. I've heard Leonard Peikoff was very upset about the Atlas Shrugged movies. He thought they were doing a great disservice. So lest anyone think that like Peikoff is like out there greenlighting all of these, bastardizations of Atlas Shrugged. Like you said, he has very little influence, despite what the article
essentially none. Do not blame Dr. Peikoff or the estate of Ayn Rand for this at all. No.
Okay.
He let it go, and now it's almost like the Fountainhead, although slightly different. The movie rights to that are now out in the business world to be purchased, but to the highest bidder, right? By the highest bidder. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I will say this, objectivists or people who really care about Rand's philosophy and all that, there's other art works that can be produced, right? That it doesn't like there's other ways to convey heroism, other characters that can be imagined and depicted. So it's going to be a very, very long time, I think, before like Atlas Shrugged will properly be adapted to the screen in a way that really does it justice. That's probably going to be a future generation, So
I think so. I think so. I'm hoping for the best, but I'm really kind of expecting something bad. So as I say, color me terrified again.
Yeah, we got Kathleen with £2 saying, I imagine Daniel Day-Lewis as Hank Rearden.
Hey.
or maybe Robert, a slightly overweight Robert Downey Jr. With his energy slightly lessened, so he's not as charismatic, but just more like, I don't know. I'm just throwing names out there. And maybe the Daily Wire can get a name to act in this and blow their entire budget and cancel the whole project. Enric with $4.99 US says, less concerned by the discussion on how poorly they'll produce Atlas Shrugged. I imagine it will escape the paywall at some point.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. At some point, premium stuff does eventually make it, often too, especially if it doesn't do well. The quicker it gets there, it'll make it to other media format. It may just come to cable TV or YouTube and then be available to just about everybody.
YouTube, I agree. It could happen. It could come to the Daily Wire's channel, but has there ever, the Daily Wire Plus has been around for a couple years or less. I don't know if anything they're producing over there will ever make it to, real TV.
Even make it to real TV.
Yeah.
The best they may be able to do is a small YouTube channel or something, right?
Mm-hmm. I'm sure somebody somewhere will pirate it, like they'll leak it. But will this ever be, in select theaters?
Versions coming out of China within a month, right?
Right. So, if the Chinese are watching the series, that can only be a step in the right direction for them.
Exactly.
For a lot of them.
Pirate away.
Kathleen with £5 says, lots of bad films made about great books. Books still doing okay, though. The earlier Atlas Shrugged series, not great anyway, in my opinion. trying to remain optimistic. Yeah, I think serenity is key here. We don't let the Daily Wire do the Daily Wire thing. The world is not going to change overnight. Justin,
there have been disastrous adaptations of novels, and the novels went on to do just fine things. Even classic novels from the past, they've had disastrous adaptations, and the novels went on to still be classics. Don't worry. I'm absolutely certain that Atlas Shrugged and The Fountainhead will survive whatever remakes they do of it. The books are just American classics, and as such in literature. So no, I'm not afraid for the novels. I'm afraid for my own sanity if I should ever have to sit through it.
The more people read Ayn Rand, I think ultimately the better right. That is.
And that is the value here. If it can be an effective billboard for the novel, then more power to it. Just please don't do such violence to
it. Justin with 199 asks, are top actors willing to work with Daily Wire? Probably not.
I would think most of the top actors would think it's radioactive, and they don't want to displease their, colleagues by taking. And today, politics is so important in Hollywood. Unfortunately.
And lest we be cynical, a lot of them, they stand opposed to what the Daily Wire represents. I mean, they're back to being anti-gay marriage. This is Ben Shapiro this week. So for the last 5-6 years or whatever, since gay marriage was legalized, legalized by the Supreme Court, you saw Ben Shapiro and others saying, oh yeah, we never really cared that much about gay marriage. It's a private contract, blah, blah, blah. Now that the reversal is in sight, that they're imagining with Roe v. Wade being overturned, they see it may be possible to undo the gay marriage legalization. Suddenly Ben Shapiro is saying, look, I mean, in society, we have certain fundamentals that man and woman create child. So he's like back to flirting with the idea of banning gay marriage. And that's just one example. Obviously, abortion is a huge issue that matters to people. So people who passionately want abortion to be legal they may refuse to work with the Daily Wire. So it's not all just, that it's career suicide, although it is. It's embarrassing to work with, like a Christian channel. I've gotten emails I get texts and emails every so often inviting me to audition as an actor. And I'm like, oh, this is way too easy. Why is this so easy? When did they start contacting actors to bring them in to audition? And then they go, okay, just so you know, this is a Scientology related project. And I'm like,
that's okay. Why I got the invite.
Yeah, no thanks.
Usually my agent has to hunt them down. Right.
So a lot of people don't want to work with the Daily Wire for perfectly good reason. So yeah, who do they have? Gina Carano. That's like the one name that you'll keep hearing.
Scientology have John Travolta do those bad sci-fi movies for him? I mean, they at least have actors like Cruise and Travolta who might do something from Scientology. Do we have anything? We have Mark, but how many big name actors do we have? Like John Travolta or something like that, or Tom Cruise because I don't expect Tom Cruise to be in this version of Atlas Shrugged, alas.
No, because it's on the Daily Wire. But I think if a mainstream studio were producing Atlas Shrugged, I think you could get big names because Brad Pitt wants to be, John Galt.
Yeah, Brad Pitt, Angelina Jolie, both expressed interest in being in Atlas Shrugged. Yeah. It's interesting. Before that, big stars did. Raquel Welch and other big stars were interested in being Dagny Taggart in the 70s. Or, in the 40s, there was a whole contest. Joan Crawford and Clark Gable were vying for roles in The Fountainhead. Times have certainly changed since then.
Yeah, I mean, I still think big actors would participate in a Rand novel adaptation. I don't think she's that taboo in the eyes of the mainstream.
It's Daily Wire that's radio.
It's the Daily Wire they won't go near. And some reasons are superficial, like some reasons are petty because they're being tribal. Other reasons for avoiding the Daily Wire, I think, are perfectly legitimate, such as the social issues that the Daily Wire, where they stand on.
If the Daily Wire had offered me a job, I would have qualms about joining them. So I can understand actors with any project the Daily Wire is producing.
Yeah, so. I would have to consider the project, I would have to wrestle with my conscience a little bit, I think, if the opportunity came. But when it came to like Scientology, I'm just like, I'm going nowhere near this.
Yeah.
But yeah, some very big actors like Travolta and Tom Cruise and many others they're members of the Church of Scientology. So yeah, they would. It doesn't surprise me that they've acted for their projects. Bonnie with $5 says, I just started reading it again today in self-defense and because I love it. I think referring to Atlas Shrugged. So that sounds
I do it
like
all the time, Bonnie.
Yeah. How many times can you count how many times you've read Atlas Shrugged?
Lost count. Sometimes I'll just dive in and read a favorite scene or a scene I think will help me be relevant today. For me, it is a constant inspiration to me. I know I've long since lost count.
Oh, I've read The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged twice each. First time as a teenager, second time, in late 20s, early 30s. So I can count. Those are not long novels. I don't just power through them all the time. Some people have read them like you. You've read that. You do it on a regular basis. Sounds like. Allie with $5 says Chris Pine, Steve Trevor from Wonder Woman, and Captain Kirk on the Star Trek movies. And I meant for Mark to be on this episode of the Daily Objective. Okay. Yeah. Well, he will be on TV Talk later today. Phil says
super chat question then.
Phil in the regular comment says he doesn't think the nuance is there with me. What was it that like he said something about zealots, like anti-Rand zealots thinking, I don't know what you mean, Phil. Sorry. But I'll work on that. Daniel with $10 says, I recall in certain Peikoff lectures him mentioning how infeasible it would be to fit even a bit of the philosophy into the script, even under the most ideal conditions. Yeah, it would be very difficult.
Impossible at the same level that Ayn Rand does in the novel. Simply impossible. Ayn Rand can describe a simple physical object, a telephone, a cup, and imbue it with this abstract meaning. Or she'll do the opposite. She'll have her philosophy and she'll concretize it in just one beautiful. You can't do that. You just cannot do that. More than that, no novel or no movie can get to the same level of philosophy ever that a novel simply has the power to reach. There are movies that can touch on philosophical themes, but that's about as far as it goes. If you can single out one theme and focus everything on it, you can get a movie audience to that one abstract theme, but that's about it. Trying to cover the part of, again, a huge spoiler, part of the climax of Atlas Shrugged is revealing John Galt's discovery of a radical new philosophy. It includes a radical new approach to ethics and metaphysics. Well, how do you convey that? How do you convey that the hero has discovered a new morality in a movie? You just can't. At that level, discussing philosophy is impossible in a film. On the other hand, I would urge you to recognize good films can touch and have real philosophical themes. They have to delimit that philosophical theme very severely and integrate everything else about the movie to that theme. That takes artistic skill.
Yeah, I would hope they don't depict the opposite of what the novel contains, which is probably going to happen. Philip with $5, a different Phil, says, do we know who sold the rights to DailyWire? Who had them after John Aguilaro was done with his movies?
I think him and his production company were the immediate sellers to the DailyWire because they're the ones who had the current rights. So.
Yeah. So in conclusion today, I would repeat, serenity is key. Just like when you walk through life trying to be attractive, it's kind of like the harder you try, the worse it gets. James, you and me, when we go out in the street, we got something for everyone. You're a charismatic, good looking guy. You get what I'm saying. You gotta be, just be cool and good things happen. And that's how objectivists or people who care about Ayn Rand need to sort of approach changing the culture. The more furious you get about various misrepresentations of Rand, kind of the farther I think normal people will stay from you. Right. Normal, healthy people, I think, are sort of who ultimately are susceptible to great ideas. This is my other concluding point is I don't think this is a great sign of like the culture changing. The fact that the Daily Wire wants to do this. If it was mainstream Hollywood, if this was Snyder, I would say they're going to ruin it. They're going to completely bastardize the story and the message. But this is a good sign. This is a sign the world is curious about Ayn Rand. So sadly,
I fully agree with that.
This is a waste of time. Basically, this is wasting. This is keeping Atlas Shrugged out of good hands and keeping it in probably bad hands. But the silver lining, I'll repeat, is that people behind the Daily Wire paywall could, as a result of this, read Rand, and then some lives can be saved, so to speak, and impacted. We could someday be interviewing somebody on this show who discovered Rand because of the Daily Wire, and now they're the Jeff Bezos of spreading philosophies, and the world is changing positively. So, let's be optimistic. Coming up, I'll repeat the announcement at 10 p.m. UK time. It's TV Talk with Mark Pellegrino, Jennifer Buoni, and Jacqueline Schumann reviewing For All Mankind, the series, and they have confirmed they will be talking about the news and updates and what this all means, as much as they're able to tell and as much as they're able to know. All right. Thank you all for joining us today. And by the way, how many of you, when you discovered Ayn Rand, she had no affiliation with conservatives? Be honest. It's been a long time that conservatives have been claiming Rand as their sweetheart, when they weren't busy denouncing her, they were pretending she was one of their own a lot of the time. So but here we are. Plenty of people today appreciate and know who Ayn Rand is and her philosophy. So it's not the end of the world if she's affiliated momentarily with, Ben Shapiro and the director of What is a Woman. Enough with the filibuster. Thank you, James. Couldn't think of a better co-host for this topic. Great to have you on. We'll be back next week for the Daily Objective. Thank you all. Hit that join button and leave a super thanks on the video to help us get the rights to Atlas Shrugged. And goodbye.